Call the Ad hoc Capital Debt Committee meeting to order on May 7th. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Director Photo,
Present.
Director Sullivan,
Present.
Director Cummings,
Present.
Alderman Govea. Alderman Klee is here. Alderman Clemmons,
Here.
Alderman O'Brien, Alderman Wilshire,
Here.
and Mayor Dodges.
Here. And we've also got Alderman Dowd, Alderman Tebow, and Alderman Sullivan. So thank you all for coming. And just to review our mission here, just for a moment before we get started. Thank you all, of course, for coming, both members of the board, but also people who are going to be presenting tonight. The amount of potential capital projects that we have across all of the divisions of the city is very great, far exceeding the amount that we can take care of or borrow the money to complete over the next few years. So this is a temporary committee that is attempting to look at all the projects and try to recommend a series of priorities in terms of in what order they should be undertaken. So I'm going to turn things over to Director Cummings, but I understand that tonight we have the Nashua Public Library, the Nashua School District, and Public Health and Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The timeline for this committee is hopefully we will hear another session of various capital expenditures that we're anticipating over a 5-year horizon. The next group that would be presenting would be DPW, looking to do that on May 13th. I also would anticipate at that time to talk about any other miscellaneous capital expenditures that would be potentially needed over the 5-year horizon that we're focusing on to come up that evening. Some of those items may be Court Street, Keefe Auditorium, some of the various transportation projects that we have. But those miscellaneous expenditures would come after the DPW presentation. And then after that, meet 1 or 2 times and hopefully promulgate a document to be presented to the Board of Aldermen by the end of May. So, Mr. Mayor, based on your overview and that timeline, I think we would be in good stead to hear from the libraries first, and then after the libraries, schools, and then public health.
All right. So I see Ms. McCormick. I don't know who's going to go ahead.
Some of my trustees.
Good evening. As you may know, my name is Linda LaFlamme, and I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees, and I have with me tonight, I can never find these people. I have with me tonight Kristen, Manny, Scott, and Padma, who are all members of our board, and we're here to present the library to you. But before they do, you ever heard the expression, there's no such thing as a free puppy? You know, somebody gives you the puppy, it's cute, it's fun, it's exciting, but then it grows up and it eats a lot and it needs health care and it needs grooming and it's expensive for the puppy. Well, in the 70s, early 70s, the Carters gave Nashua a free library. Money for it, designs for it, threw some apple trees in, and over the years, at the time, it was exciting, it was new, it was very 70s, and it has grown, and it is now not just a repository of books, it's a community center. But over those 50 years, it has also needed a lot of care and feeding, and by golly, right now, it needs a lot of grooming. So to tell you about that a little bit more and in more detail, I give you Manny and Kristen and Manny.
Hey everybody, I'm Kristen King. Okay, so why are we here before you today? We're here before you because the library is in need of significant renovation. We're looking at a scope of between $19 and $30 million to deliver what the library truly needs. That isn't wants, that's truly what the building needs, and we'll talk about how we arrived there. We also believe that our library building should be a model in the community because it has heavy traffic from the community and a lot of use and a lot of different purposes that it's used for. We believe it should be a model facility for sustainability, for accessibility, and for safety. And right now, we're not meeting any of those in our building. We're significantly behind the current standards simply because the building it just celebrated its 50th birthday just a couple years back. And we haven't maintained, and really very little has been done to the building in the 50 years that it's been a location in our city. There's also urgency to act on the building because we have had some failures of mechanical systems already that we've been able to Band-Aid, but the systems are so out of date that you can't get parts for the building systems anymore. So we've had trouble keeping up with that and are uncertain of our ability to keep doing so, to keep Band-Aiding things together. We really do need to get it updated so that the building can be safe and so that it can work. So that's why we're here. And Manny will share a little bit about our agenda.
Right, so Manny Spitia. So what we're going to go over today is just a little bit about the library, our mission and strategic plan, patron services budget, all that. The history of our building, some technical assessment of our building by Design Lab. They came out, did an assessment. We'll go through that, a little bit of that, and the results from the results from that, and then the renovation project scoping, why we arrived at that number, and then some next steps and timeline. So, sorry. There you go.
Okay, so we wanted to start by talking to you about what the library does in our city, and if you haven't been there lately, just talk about what we're doing over there on Court Street. So we thought we'd start with our mission and our strategic plan here in the city. In 2021, the Board of Trustees and the library staff worked together with an external consultant as well as with members of the community to develop our strategic plan. And the thing that it's actually on here twice and I want to share with you is our mission. And I'm going to read that out loud. I think it's important as we think about what the building is for and why we should care for it. So our mission is to enrich our community by being a safe, welcoming, and inclusive environment to discover, connect, create, and grow. We think that as an entity, we're doing a great job espousing that mission and bringing that to the community. We think that the building is not serving our purpose very well, simply because it needs some TLC. Our strategic plan you'll see here, and there's a full document on our website. Would love you to check it out if you haven't seen it already. It's a couple of years old, but it's I think still very valid and relevant. So maybe you have seen it in that couple of years. But you'll see our strategic plan is built into 3 main areas, and I think all of these are relevant to the building renovation that we need to do. We're looking for the library to be a welcoming and comfortable space. We're looking for it to support learning and culture, and we're looking for it to help keep our community collaborative and connected. So those are our 3 strategic areas. Not going to read the rest of the slide, but you're welcome to take a look, and also, like I said, the full plan is on our website. Okay, there we go. Next, we want to talk about kind of the visitors that we have to the library, the people that we serve in the community. So obviously the people that we serve are the population of the city of Nashua, the residents, people who work in the city, people who own property and some of their relatives and things like that. So we serve a community of, as you know, over 90,000 residents, and we get a lot of traffic from that population. It declined a little bit after COVID, but is still strong and growing stronger as we kind of bounce back. So in the past 12 months, we've had over 183,000 visitors to the library. There are 51,500 active library card holders. Our staff of 40 people last year answered 75,000 questions from the community, which is really astounding to me to think about. And we've had to various programs of small to big sizes that the library hosted. We had over 12,000 attendees to our programs. So I think that shows we're busy. I guess the other thing that I'd like to talk about is the services that we provide. So, and Linda referred to this, right? The library isn't just a quiet building full of books where people go to pick something out and take it home or to, sit quietly in a corner and read. It's a bustling community center, and we see it increasingly becoming that. That's what 21st century libraries are, and we offer we offer books and we love books. We have many, many of them. We have a large collection, but we offer many services to the community. People come to use computers, printers, faxes, copiers, to study, to use our maker spaces in the children's room and the teen room. People borrow from our kind of more special collections. We have a puzzle swap, a seed library. We offer museum passes, play kits for families. And also, we've just started a library of things, which we're really excited about. If there's something that you need that you don't have at home, you maybe can come to the library and find it instead of buying it. We host a lot of events in the city because we're one of the larger community spaces that exists. So we work with the city on Pride, on Multicultural Festival, the Sustainability Fair, Nashua Goes Back to School, United Way Volunteer Fair. Those are some of the larger events, like you saw our programming there. We offered, and some of those are joint programs or hosted by guests, but we also offered over 700 free programs to the community last year. We're a warming and cooling center. I think a lot of folks know that for community members. That's why our HVAC systems are so critical and we need them to be updated and maintained. I'll pause there. Oh, and we also have an art gallery, which is pretty neat. Okay. So the last thing I like to point out, and I'll share a little bit about my background here. I'm an accountant. I've been controller at a number of small and medium organizations, and when we get to budgeting time, which is this time of year, I'm always very impressed by what the library gets done on a very small budget, so $3.7 billion. You'll see most of that is people. We employ 40 professionals. Although $2 million in professionals actually isn't that lot spread across 40 people, but we have 40 amazing people working across all different aspects of our services. We have quite a bit that we spend. You'll see property services. A lot of that is utilities and repairs. So you'll see that in there too, as well as some groundskeeping and other things. And really the library is, we think, one of the best values in the city. Some of that might be because our budget isn't so great in terms of maintaining the building, but we think we get a lot done on that budget. I'm going to turn over to Manny so he can actually talk about the space that we're in.
I just also, real quick, that line, for the price of $41, 2 hardcover books, that is how much you pay for our library. Like, that's incredible. That is one of the best bargains you can get. And like, you know, you can go to Barnes & Noble, get 2 books, or you can spend a whole year at the library and get an unlimited amount of books, because we also no longer have late fees. So the history of our building, so as Kristen talked about, we got a brand new building back in 71, Kristen Linda mentioned, and it was, worth $2.1 million at the time, about $16 million in today's dollars. Since then, we've had a few updates. So in 95, we had $450,000 the city covered for music, art, and media wing. We had our front entrance also updated for $150,000. That was also covered by the city. And then the roof of the building, the city also covered for $200,000. So since 2009, the library has taken it upon itself to really kind of renovate things then. So in 2016, the Chandler wing needed a renovation. Actually, desperately needed that renovation, and which anybody who's been to the bottom floor can see it is a beautiful, beautiful space now. But we spent $500,000 in that. And then in 2022, we did do our technical assessment, and we paid for that from the library trustee fund as well. But as you can see, we haven't had really anything from the city in terms of repairs for the building since really 2009. And so it's been 15 years and long overdue. Next slide. Oh, actually, I can go back real quick. And I forgot to mention the bottom part, which I think is really important. So the library's building envelope, so the exterior, the mechanical systems, our fire safety systems, we haven't updated those since 71. And so we are kind of feeling like we are on the brink of things, like, of whether it's the HVAC goes and then, where do folks go? So we are feeling, and like Kristen mentioned, there are parts that are no longer made for our system. And I'll show you a few photos of those in a little bit, but we're very worried, and we wouldn't be, we wouldn't have done this building technical assessment if we weren't on regularly fixing these through Band-Aid solutions. So Next slide. So, you know, we do have, it is a beautiful, I like to say we have a lot of pride in what folks see. So like you can see the front of the building, we provide our copier services, or like I said, we have meeting spaces, we have our theater. We have a lot of very beautiful, like, you know, our children's library section. We have a makerspace in our team room. We have a lot of really great spaces that we do offer. But turn to the next slide. We also have a lot of beautiful, like not beautiful things that we try to hide from folks because we are a trusted partner in the community. We don't want folks seeing some of the ugly things, otherwise they may not come to the library. But we have issues with, you know, safety issues. We only have one ADA compliant bathroom in the entire building. That is our system right there. That is, you know, if this was in my house, I had knob and tube in my house, like, you know, which recently we got removed, and it's a danger. So we can't sustain our library off that HVAC system anymore. Like it really just cannot. We have issues with the building envelope. There's cracks. We have leaking that is going into the actual library space, which we get concerned about because then we might have some leakage around electrical, which is a hazard not only to the actual building itself, but to the patrons that we have that visit our library daily. And like I mentioned, you know, I think we are just not up to code, not just on the ADA bathrooms, but also with the automatic sprinkler and smoke detection systems. So, and there isn't just sufficient emergency lighting. We are, you know, while we like to, you know, present ourselves as we have it together because that's what we do, we have a lot of issues that are lurking in the back that will come and hit us in the face. And when they do, it's not going to be a pretty sight. So next slide. So we did. Oh, that's yours? Yeah,
So we saw this coming, right? We've had some problems in the building. Maintenance had trouble keeping up. We've had some delays in getting things repaired. So in 2022, we did go out and the city split the bill with the trust funds of the library to get a technical building assessment done. So we did an RFP. We selected design lab architects to perform a review of the building. So their scope included really the entire building. They looked at all the areas where we provide service, right? Publicly accessible areas, all of our restrooms, our staff areas. They looked at our HVAC, electrical, and plumbing, and they looked at the exterior of the building as well. They came on site 5 different times with different experts and different tools to prepare their assessment of the building and delivered a comprehensive report to us, which then was delivered to the Board of Aldermen as well. So they prepared their report to talk about the problems that are in the building, but also to make recommendations on what we should do. What are the critical pieces that need to be addressed to bring the building to full functioning status, I guess. And then they also gave us estimated costs on that. This was back in 2022, but still pretty recent and pretty relevant. So that's what we'll share with you today. This is how we came up with our ask. Oh, I'm sorry, the font is a little bit small here, but I'll walk you through it. You can read it. So Design Lab gave us findings in 7 major areas. I combined number 1 and 4. So the first one, which we've talked about, the building is 50 years old. And aside from that 2017 beautiful renovation of the Chandler Wing downstairs, really nothing's been done. And even in that Chandler Wing renovation, like mechanical systems, plumbing, electrical, those weren't touched. It was to make the space more functional, but not to actually, update. So the library has not been maintained over its life, and despite a heavy use and traffic, we don't feel that the building meets the standard that it should be meeting given what it does for the city of Nashua. Building codes and energy codes have evolved significantly, and as we've said, nothing's been done since really 1971. So we're unable to meet our objectives that we shared with you in our strategic plan to make the library a comfortable, safe, accessible, inclusive space. We're also unable to ensure that the library building will be able to perform in case of an emergency, in case of a mechanical failure. We are uncertain that we'll be able to keep the library doors open if something was to fail in the building that we could not repair ourselves. most of the, there's also, the building doesn't perform well thermally, it's not well insulated, some of the masonry and flashings aren't performing very well, there's some leakages and leaking windows, so we feel like too much of our annual budget is allocated to the heavy cost of utilities as well. And many areas of the library aren't comfortable, staff and patrons complain that they're too cold or too hot, it's not doing well and it's getting leakier, I guess, over time. And then most of our systems, as we've said, are past their useful life. It means that we can't get parts. It means that we can't maintain, keep them functioning well. Jen was saying, as we walked into the room earlier today, that she gave me figures, and I can share them with you if you'd like, on where we're at in terms of our utility and repair costs this budget season. We're actually doing okay on repairs, and she said, it's because today's the first warm day and we haven't had our first HVAC failure of the year yet. So we're expecting that to come. It always does. It has every year. Those costs are pretty high. We're also worried that we may not be able to maintain occupancy, or that the library could need to close its doors at some point if there was some kind of a critical building failure of the systems. We're at a higher risk of fire and things like that because our emergency systems are not up to date. We don't have automatic sprinkler or fire systems in the building. The envelope, the study came back and said the envelope of the building is generally sound. It's a big concrete block, and so that's structurally very good. But there is some cracking, there is some water leakaging. The flashing behind the brick exterior of the building isn't holding up. I'm not sure if it was that it wasn't done the way it should have been in the first place, or that it just hasn't held up over time. But we are seeing it wasn't done the way it should have been in the first place. Thank you, Linda.
There are gaps where there's no flashing.
Yeah, okay, so it's not that it eroded. So we have leaking coming into the building. There's water getting into some of the library spaces as well, with some of the pictures that Manny showed. So we also think that there's some health hazards there due to some of the water coming in, or possible damage to our collections. So these are the problems and the implications of the problems. And here's what Design Lab suggested that we do about it. So they gave us scope in different areas for the project. So they laid out kind of these first two boxes, the hard costs and the soft costs of a base project to renovate the library. They said these are the things that you really need to do to get the building to function the way that it should at the time in 2022, but also in 2024, to meet code, to meet accessibility standards, to be able to rely on the mechanical, plumbing, electrical systems of the building. So this is the list of things they gave us that said, these are the things that you really have to do to address the problems that you're seeing in the building. There's obviously soft costs on top of that. Any construction project, given that you're a CapEx committee, I'm assuming that you're expecting that and it's not a surprise, I hope. So the base project, the range that they gave us back in 2022 was 16.2 to 18.9 million. They also suggested that if you're going to do these things anyway, you may want to look at some of the other things that haven't been looked at in some time in the building or never been touched at all. Flooring, paint, ceilings, things like that. So they suggested that this enhanced scope box is something that we should consider so that we're doing this project once and not multiple times as we're opening things up. So that was their additional suggestions. The box on the bottom right, other optional scope, are things they suggested that we could do. Some of those may get addressed through other city projects like the plaza renovation and the Riverwalk. We aren't asking for funds for those pieces today. If money comes up some way, somehow, great, or maybe the library trustees would be able to pursue other avenues, but we aren't asking for that today, but did want to just share, this is what they said those kinds of things would cost as well. I'm going to turn you back to Manny.
And so, yeah, I think, looking at those, I'm actually go back real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Those hard costs and soft costs, that's basically the baseline. This is what we need. This is, fun fact, I did the New Hampshire Saves program in my house not that long ago. Great plug for them. But they came up to make my house a little bit more energy efficient. And when they went upstairs, guess what they found? Knob and tube. And so when they did that, then that had to be fixed. So when a project like this is going to be undertaken, there are going to be things that are found. There are going to be issues like, we can do some of the library plaza, and I know that we're also going to have issues with maybe asbestos there. So that's just our realities of living in New England and having access to, hundreds and like 100-year-old things. So we're gonna have to do a lot of these just all at once. So that's, we can't really piecemeal it all together. It's really kind of a one-time thing. So the timeline of this, we're gonna continue our work with this committee and just, hopefully develop the budget needs and timelines for the library renovation. We're just gonna continue to, make a plan so that we can optimize the use of any funds that allow the library to serve the Nashville community. And in fiscal year 2025, we're gonna, pursue a space needs assessment and a feasibility study, and we're gonna determine the amounts in today's dollars and how much it's gonna be, because that study was done in 2022 as well. So those numbers are, those numbers were 2022 numbers. We're in 2024, things have not gone down, things continue to go up. We're gonna inform whether renovating the existing building or building a new facility is the best way, and we have to exhaust all options, so, this is a reality. And the results of the study will help optimize the construction renovation plan to best serve the community, because we do want a 21st century library, a model for our community, a space that is already a community hub for so many folks here in our city. And then following that, we're gonna hopefully refine and finalize the project scope, and then hopefully by the late fiscal year 26, early fiscal year 27, we'll be able to begin renovation and construction activities. So it's it's our timeline, and we're hoping that it can be done within the next several years, so we can actually move forward and not wait for the next HVAC incident to happen. If you would like to take a look at the full building assessment that we talked about, we have a QR code here that you can scan that has, I believe it has even more photos, it has even more photos, and it has and more details about what we talked about. So please take a look at it. But we're happy to take any questions now for anybody on the committee.
All right, anybody have questions? Alderman Tebow.
You're on the committee.
No, that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First thing, I'm glad that we have good trustees on our library, and I'm glad we have people an accountant in different areas where it really makes a lot of sense to be on the board of trustees for this library, so thank you for that. I was born in 1971, and there's parts that I need that they don't make anymore, so I feel like the library does today, that's for sure. I probably have lots of theoretical questions, but I'm not gonna ask everything tonight. Is there any problem, I hate to say this because then people are gonna be concerned, but is there problems with pests at all?
No,
No
not
pest
that we
issues.
have, now, we haven't had the pest people officially come in, but nothing was brought to our attention, and they very.
Jen has a response.
What happened?
We have regular pest service in the building,
Okay.
along with the city.
Thank
upfront.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Which is why, when they looked in the corners, they didn't find anything.
Okay. You mentioned, or someone had mentioned that, and I think Manny did at the very end, kind of slipped in there. Well, maybe we build another building. So I look at this and I see the 25 to 30 million, right? So this was something where when the Performing Arts Center was built, and it was, 25 million, 30 million, people were freaking out about that. There are gonna be critics of any either fixtures or new library out there, and they're gonna say it's a library, People go in there, the homeless go in there, it's just books, you can get online now. Like, why should we spend our tax dollars to pay for that? Now, you know me, I'm the biggest supporter of the library. I was just there. I just picked up books on my way here. So I'm the biggest supporter. But what do you tell critics about, how do you change their mind? How do you get this through? Because I think this is, when you look at the different things that this committee is prioritizing in order, fire, some of these other improvements that maybe people might think are more important. How do you, and I'm concerned about the HVAC, that's a huge deal. How do you convince people that this should be higher on that list of priorities?
Well, and that's a very good question. And that's a question that, as trustees, we've struggled with, because let's face it, bad flashing isn't sexy. Well, wait a minute, maybe that was a bad example. But the kinds of things we're having to do, the fact that we have 3 air handlers, 2 are past life, and the new one is 30 years old, that doesn't get people excited. A new building maybe would get people excited. It might make people say, what, you got a perfectly good one, it's only 50 years old. So that's going to be our challenge. It is going to be our challenge, and we are not looking necessarily to have the city foot the entire bill. We've talked amongst ourselves about getting fundraising help, looking for foundations, whatever we can think of,
Grants.
basically, or whatever you guys can think of. We welcome the input. But yeah, that's a hard sell. All I can say off the top of my head right now is it's not just books. And that, I think, is what we are going to be focusing on, because it is a community center. It is a building that is used by the city, and the plaza area is used by the city for a lot of their events. I mean, Nashua goes back to school. I mean, all these school kids are coming. They come, they see the books. It works with their education system. It brings them together in an age where kids are so organized or on their phones or not coming together and watching a puppet show, playing in a maker's lab. But if the fire department comes in and does an inspection and says, you don't have sprinklers, you don't have heat, your smoke detectors and heat detectors are past their life, and don't even get started about the panel that controls all of that, which is outdated, we're looking at not being able to be the community center we want to grow to be.
And that we already are.
And we are
And that we already are.
the
I
even
think
better
while there are
community
a
center.
number of critics, there are also a lot of people in this city that use the library and are fans that would really not be happy if we could not provide what we provide. So I think that's part of it.
And I
too.
think it is also a draw for Nashua. I mean, why did they build the Arts Center? To be part of a vibrant downtown that draws people in? Well, that's what a library community center can do as well. And so if we don't have that, I mean, Manchester does, if we don't, that makes us look bad.
But
Can I add on the safety side? Sorry,
Yes.
I'm Padma. So I think one of the thing is, I mean, I have a 21-year-old son, but if I have a kid and if the building is not safe, I'll be very, scared to send my kid there. And again, students, the kids are the one, the feature, like in the feature leaders or whatever, right? And the schools are also using us. So that's the biggest concern right now. Like the carpet that whenever I see,
Oh,
it's not part of that, but I'm just saying it, right? So when as a parent, when I bring my child, small children or something, it's not safe at all.
And I think the ramifications of just having to shut down the library I think would be just a bad, a negative spot on our city. Having to say, you have towns, smaller towns across the state that have, wonderful libraries, but if you were to say Nashua doesn't have a library anymore, we don't have any more story time for the kids. We no longer have, Meet the Author in the Chandler Wing. We no longer have our theater that hosts so many events. We no longer have Nashua Goes Back to School in front of our beautiful library. It gives access to, and we no longer have kids who are spending hours reading these books. And we lose our heating and cooling center that so many folks use. It will hurt, and it will be a really bad spot for our city. So we are, hate that we are ringing the alarm now, but it's, this is why we're doing it, is because it's too important.
Sorry. Oh, go ahead.
I would also just mention that the National Public Library connects with so many other city programs and departments. So we connect with the Public Health Department by providing vaccines. We provide tax help for the citizens of Nashua. We provide literacy initiatives and ELL initiatives with the school district. There's a lot of partnerships. So to kind of answer your question, we are a community hub. We have been working with the United Way through Cultural Navigators and One Greater Nashua. So it does a lot, just to kind of answer your question.
Great, thank you.
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple things to say, and then I think probably just one quick question. I do understand how important the library is. I do a weekly newsletter, and our National Public Library is highlighted in every single week. Not only do I promote the history of our library in general throughout the city, but I also put your calendar in there from the movies that are there. Some are first runs, some are the older movies, the children's programs that you have, the preschool programs and so on, and some of the puzzle things that you have, and the adult live games that you've had. I think it was Candyland looked really interesting. So I'm quite familiar with all the things that you do beyond the books. And I think it's extraordinarily important. And I think COVID showed us how much the community clamored, because when you had to shutter your doors and we had everybody hollering and yelling, I need the library, I need the library, I need the library. So that's proof that the community wants the library and needs the library. So my first concern is going to be, and every time you said it, I felt my body kind of tense up, being up to code and being open. Truly scares me when we say this, and I think someone mentioned about bringing their child in there and hearing these things. I mean, are we now going to have half the bodies that we had in there? All these programs that we're talking about, I want to, and I'm hoping that we can somewhat reassure those that are listening that the sky is not going to fall tomorrow.
No.
And maybe we won't have air conditioning, maybe we won't have heat, and we have to close it, but the fire department is not going to close us down.
You make a very good point. It is a double-edged sword bringing all this to light, because
We're simply trying to, we're not ahead of it, but trying to get ahead of a catastrophic problem.
we have for a long
There's not
time,
one right now.
yeah, we for a long time have been reacting to everything that's going on. What we're trying to do, and what we tried to do with this facilities study, was to say, let's get ahead of it. Let's be proactive and see, what do we need to fix? And I can tell you, Manny and I can both tell you from living in old houses, even though if you have knob and tube, which is actually very safe, even though if you have knob and tube wiring, you have not things that are not up to today's code, doesn't mean they're not safe. It doesn't mean the place isn't safe. Is it as comfortable as it could be? No. Is the fire commission perhaps as happy with what we have for fire prevention and getting people out safely? Maybe not. But it was up to code at the time it was built. So it's not like it's falling apart or it was done slapdash and dangerous. But the codes have changed. I just had a water heater replaced just yesterday. And I discovered that from 2011, the codes had changed as to what I was allowed to have and how hot it needed to get. But was my old one not safe? No, it was fine. But codes change, and if we can be safer, and we're doing all of this already, let's be safer. I mean, that's good for everybody. So, and the other thing I wanted to bring out with the safety is also the accessibility. And codes there have changed a lot from when that was built. And there's nothing wrong with the railings. They're really cool 70s style railings, but they're not up to the official code for being able to grab around it. And so those should be changed. If you're doing a project of a certain size, you are required by law to bring it up to ADA standards. And so, once again, it's not that the stairs are dangerous, it's just they're not as safe as the codes would like them to be today.
May I?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I grew up in a house that was 152 years old. We had knob and tube and floors that went like this. My brother loved doing his little Hot Wheels, so they went down that. So I completely understand that. I understand putting the pennies instead of the fuses to keep everything running. Yes, that was not safe. But
We don't do that.
no, good. But so now, getting up past all that and looking at this, I heard something that made me happy when I hear things like grants, fundraising, et cetera. As the Board of Trustees, have you looked into any kind of grants or fundraising, maybe try some, and I'm not saying that this will affect the answer on that, but it's always nice to see if we have some possible public-private kind of funding. We talked about the Carter family was kind enough to do this for us, and thank goodness for them. But are there any other companies, organizations that you think that you could tap on the shoulder? And I know that certain other communities have used new market tax credits. I'm sorry to use that four-letter word in front of Director Cummings, but I know that some communities have used that for libraries and so on. So have you investigated anything like that that kind of helps us going, ooh, maybe if we went there, we have this edge?
We have had a consultant in to talk to us about fundraising and starting foundations and how to go about looking for those people. Unfortunately, Nashua isn't what it was in the 70s, and it's not quite as simple to identify who they are, or even if there are people who could step forward and help that way. Grants are something we were talking about. In fact, we were talking about the budget.
Before we,
Yep.
I think what we learned from having the
Microphone.
consultant come in and talk to us, oh, sorry. What we learned from having the consultant come in and talk to us is our project, as Linda said, isn't that sexy. So it is very hard to get people to come in and fund a project that's addressing things that largely people won't see. What we're here asking you for today isn't like the total beautification of the building. It isn't adding on square footage or anything like that. It's really just addressing needs. That's hard to find, and the advice from the consultant that we brought in on fundraising was fundraising is probably not your best path here, unless we have like just the right contact that we don't see in Nashua. Sorry, go ahead, Grant.
And certainly, if anybody knows of anyone who would be a great contact, tell us. But we are looking at grants. We are looking at, if we, for example, one thing that the facility study told us was that the roof was in good shape. We had something that was in good shape. It was very exciting. And it had another 5 years left on it. But now it's 2 years down the road. But
Ben, did you have a question?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So there was a slide and it said something along the lines of fully electric building. What does that mean?
Fully electric building, okay, that would be the possibility of getting rid of the natural gas, ending the reliance on that. There has been talk about, I actually have a note on that one, but I can't find it. But that was an idea that was thrown out by the folks that did the study, was to transition away from the natural gas that we have to potentially generate our own electricity, because one of the things that we were looking at back in 2022 was the possibility of the solar panels, and could we partner with any other public buildings in Nashua, potentially get some benefits if we were to do the solar panels. They said we would have to redo our pebble roof, but that's okay, because we're almost down to 5 years down the road. But that was one thing we've been talking, but right now, honestly, the fundraising and the grants, we're still at the early stages.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. It's going to be a hard, I'm just going to be honest, it's going to be a hard lift probably to get that full list done. So I guess what I would like to see is the trustees prioritize what they would like to get done in order of number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Because if this committee can allocate any money towards the library, then it would be nice to know what we were allocating it towards.
Okay. That has been a question that has come up since we first came up with the facility study, is can it be piecemeal? Can we part it out? Certainly, just right now, I would tell you that getting the basics done, getting the HVAC system done, getting the fire up to code, getting those air handlers replaced that we can't get parts for. But once you get into all of that, you have to open everything up, and for the electrical certainly, you have to tear a certain amount of stuff out. If you already have it torn out, it is cheaper to keep going and do everything than it is to then close it back up and 5 years down the road pay to reopen it again.
We're also gonna be mandated to do certain things if we start
Microphone.
other Oh, we're gonna be mandated to do certain things as well if we.
In these various
start doing it.
stages or whatever you have, are there additional bathroom facilities in any of this?
I think we're updating what we have.
We're up, well, we do, the number of fixtures that we have is below what we're supposed to have for the building occupancy. So that would be something that would have to be looked at. The other optional scope certainly would not necessarily be anything we would be asking for, as Kristen said, at this point. The enhanced scope would be nice.
That's our wiggle room, I think.
That's our wiggle room. But the reality is that 16 to 18 million is really what we need to get the building back on track and secure it for the next 50 years.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, and I appreciate those comments. I just would hate to see this committee convene in a few weeks and decide, well, they said they needed the whole 14 million or 18 million, we don't have it, so we're gonna move it to another project that does work, that we can do it for. So I would hope that the trustees will come back with, again, a list of things that, if we can't get the whole thing done, maybe $5 million, $10 million, what we can do. So, you know, I just hope that we could see something like that.
And Design Lab has helped us with priorities and logical order in which to do things. I mean, there's no point in fixing your ceiling
Right.
if your roof leaks, you know?
Yep.
And so that, in fact, when we asked them for the study, that was one of the things we stressed, is let us know what is the most important. And,
How long do you think the space, you mentioned here somewhere, the space needs assessment that you want to do next?
yes, how long?
How long will that take, do you think?
We are in the process of putting together the RFP.
It's in the budget.
You can.
So in speaking with the consultant and their architect partner, they expect 6 to 9 months to complete that. We're hoping to go out to bid in June. We're expecting the cost to be in the vicinity of $100,000, which we don't have, but.
There's money in the budget for that.
Okay, so I think 6 to 9 months from now, the space needs assessment will be done, and as part of that, we'll also do a feasibility study just to touch on that question of whether it would be more financially advantageous to just build something new from scratch on a plot of land to be determined.
All right, anybody have any other questions? Mr. Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So actually, my questions were along those lines. So if you're gonna undertake a space needs facility, feasibility study, and it may come back and say whatever it does, relative to your space program, would it behoove us to get those results before we start to travel down the path of understanding? What you're asking for here is design and hard construction costs for what it looks like to be a deferred capital maintenance project of your existing site. And I guess, I just want to know, are we putting the cart before the horse, in essence? Because if you haven't done the feasibility and the space needs programming assessment yet, does that data and does that community engagement help you potentially get a better product at the end?
That certainly will help us get a better product at the end. Unfortunately, you're having your meetings now and not 6 to 9 months down the road when we have that information.
I also think having the context of a budget helps us get better results out of that study, because we can make trade-offs in terms of how we use our space. So it's a chicken and egg thing, right? But I think we will have a better result of the study and optimize our plan better, knowing this initial scope and what we're kind of putting in front of you is these are the needs of the building. Then kind of given a, well, here's what you can work with, we'll come up, we hope, with a plan that maximizes the use of those funds.
So again, traveling it down that path, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna say right now that this project, hard costs at 15 million, soft costs at 5 million, noting that you only have it escalated through 25, This is really like a $25-ish million project is what I would say. It's probably, that's a little bit more realistic. And so when I look at it in those terms, and then I say to myself, you're talking about an existing 60,000 square foot building, and you're looking at deferred capital maintenance, and you haven't done a space program feasibility study yet. And what if the data comes back and says you only need a 30,000 square foot space? You can be more efficient because your current existing building is, let's face it, not the most efficient building in the world.
No, it is.
And so now we're at a 30,000 square foot building. If you did it new build, just throwing an $800 square foot, which is a reasonable new construction per square foot number to use, that puts you at $25 million right there. It's essentially the same type of target budget you're looking at now, and you get a brand new product, you get a brand new facility. And so I'm asking the question because we need to be very deliberate with these funds, and I just want to make sure that you're making the best choice possible at this point in time. So that's why I wanted to raise this question.
Then let me answer it this way. The library, in whatever building it houses it, is in need of those funds. I mean, if you guys want to move us back to the Hunt building, we'll try to do it with those funds.
How many square feet are in the Hunt building?
No.
I'm just curious. It's like 15, maybe 15.
I have no idea.
It's a guess. 10.
I was still in the children's room when the Hunt building was active. But I'm making light, but I am serious. Is the library a community center wherever it lives going forward needs that money? Because where it's living right now, it can't continue. I mean, we will make it continue. We'll use our duct tape and our chewing gum, and we will make it continue the way we have for the last 2 decades. But it could be so much better. And yeah, I love that. I love that building. It was my childhood. But I would indeed think about a new building if it could serve the community better. If we could do it for the kind of money that we're talking about here, it's definitely something to think about.
We have 100,000 for the, I think there's 100,000 for the space needs in
Yeah.
the budget. Which won't pass for a little while. Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, I just wonder though, we spent all this time and effort. We've spent all of this time and effort getting millions and millions of dollars funded for the library plaza. So I would hate to see that federal funding go, we do that project, and then the library moves. Literally, you talk about wasting taxpayers. I'm serious, but you talk about wasting taxpayers' money. That is literally the definition of wasting taxpayers' money. So I'm skeptical of the study that you're putting forward, the $100,000 that you're putting forward, because maybe that $100,000 could go towards this. So I guess I'm beginning to question what the strategic plan is.
The study is not just to come up with, should we build a new building or should we, it's to talk about what kinds of spaces do we need, how should the building look, how should we use the building? I don't know if Jen wants to add anything. Yeah, that's the stay or go is one part of it.
And all that, I think, we're talking about this big number here, and I think we've been asked, have you exhausted all options? This is what we're talking about when we talk about exhausting all options. If it means a new building, that's something that, folks will have to live with, and that's a decision that, will come with ramifications with the court of, public opinion. But I think it's something that's real, and I think, we're very fortunate to have gotten funding for the plaza. We're very excited for the renovations that are gonna happen in the plaza. The $100,000 is gonna be going towards making sure that we look towards what the space should look like, and looking at, if we have other options, what those other options look like. I personally would not like to see the library move, but if if we're talking about exhausting all options, we gotta take a look.
And just to, a couple things. First of all, the federal funds that we got from the plaza would not end up being wasted, because the plaza would still be in downtown Nashua. It would still be a drawing spot, and we've got the Court 3 Theater, thank you, right there, and that people come to. And with the Peacock Players, they get a lot of kids So it
And the
wouldn't
river in downtown and.
Yeah, and the people who live downtown, so so that wouldn't be wasted. And the facilities and needs study, another history lesson. When the new library was built, one of the things that was heralded about it was how much space they had provided for us. Because we were just going to expand and fill it with books. And it was wonderful. We had 3 floors, we had all this space. Now, that's not so much a priority for libraries. So, do we need all that space? How best to put that space to use? Computer labs? Maybe. That's the kind of thing the facility study is, what really does our modern library need to do its best, and how can we get the most of our funds, most out of our funds, to provide that?
All right, so we need to move on eventually to the school department and to public health, but why don't we have Alderwoman Klee has a
And
question.
I think Director Cummings does too. Just a quick note, building a new library does not necessarily mean we have to leave the space it's in. We have a parking lot, we have other things that we can do. So just putting that out there, we could just relocate it, slide it off to the side and still kind of be there, just putting, yeah, pick it up and move it over. Just kind of putting that out there, is it doesn't mean that we're gonna, put it over in Ward 1 or, on the border of Hollis or something. So, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but this is a big ticket. So I want to reiterate what Alderman Clemens said. I would love to see, you said that you were provided that. I'd love to see some prioritizations of what it would be. You said your building is large and can be reprogrammed. Can we turn part of it into something like the Arlington Street? Because the downtown area could use something close to that as well. So I would like to hear some of those things and the priorities of, and if we had to, what is it that we have to do to get it done? I think Director Clemens.
I do, Mayor, if I may, and I know you want to move this along. So I understand now that maybe you'll be using that feasibility study and space program to look at the existing building to maybe reprogram it within the 4 walls and see what comes out of that. So I think that's great. Or the alternative, or whatever it may be. But switching gears a little bit, have you thought about what your approach or methodology is going to be relative to how you envision getting this actually built, in terms of, and something I've been struggling with is understanding is there going to be a building committee for this? Is there, or what is the business plan, if you will, or what is the strategic plan for this project in and of itself?
Who would supervise it?
Who would supervise it? Exactly. Like, I know it's very clear with all these other departments within the city how it works, because it's so very codified in our charter or within our ordinances. And as you've pointed out, really hasn't been thought about since 1971. So the question at hand is, have you thought about how that would actually work?
We have had discussions, once again, chicken and the egg, early days. We have had discussions. We have talked about how it would be great to have a joint aldermanic trustees committee that could oversee it. We've talked about, as I mentioned at the last full board meeting, to talk about the possibility of getting somebody on the trustees board who has some project management experience. That would be a great thing. The other half of your question, sorry, lost my thread.
Well, just what your business plan may be.
Okay.
So I could only assume maybe that part of the scope of this plan that you're going to go forward with in the next fiscal year is to bring in a potentially consultant to help you do a financing plan and map out some of these details, but I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, well,
Now? You want that now?
Well, I think this body is being asked to make a big commitment in relative to how much money they have to spend, and so I just want to make sure that this body has the confidence, if they so choose to prioritize this project, that it has, some of these details have been thought about.
Okay, they have been thought of, they have not been ironed out. I think that's the best way, to put it. When we, in all honesty, in 2022, when we heard these numbers, we had to pick our jaws up off the floor, and realized we had a much bigger job ahead of us than we ever thought we did. And talking to this committee and trying to get some commitment of funds, so it's real and not just theoretical, that's one of our first steps. But certainly, we're not just gonna say, oh, look, we got some money, let's go spend it. We will come up with a plan. We would love to talk to the board for a plan. I know you, sir, are vastly experienced from the school system. We'd love to chat with you some more. So we have thought of that. We have also thought of the other piece, which hasn't been addressed here, but I will be very quick, is what we do while all these renovations are being done. And we have had some really innovative ideas that could actually benefit the library and get them into areas of the community that we don't have as much exposure, but I'll leave that for later.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening. I know we're passionate about it, we went on a long more time.
It's all right. So I see we have the Superintendent Andrade and President Bishop and others from the schools. So why don't we turn it over to you at this time?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always hard following passionate librarians. We did not come with a PowerPoint this evening. But before we go into some projections, I really want to thank the Mayor, the Board of Aldermen, the Board of Education, the JSSBC. So in my 2 years as superintendent, and I think I make a remark at every JSSBC meeting, on just the incredible work going on in our schools, and thank you, Mr. Dowd, and chair, as the chair. It's incredible. Like, I think over the last 2 years, we have roughly about $160 million going on in construction in our schools, and you don't see that anywhere in the state. So again, I just really want to thank this board and the mayor and the Board of Education for their dedication and providing the resources for the district. I'm also really glad to see this board, this committee convene. Just listening to the librarians, and I know last week there was another meeting and different departments presenting, really to get a unified vision on what's going on. We're only one department of this city, so again, I think to have that comprehensive view of everything going on and just that everyone's able to assess the needs of each department, sometimes it's difficult to weigh. Obviously, I want to advocate for my department, but I also know other departments have needs as well. Same thing, we struggle between our 18 schools of where are we investing, what's our plan kind of going forward. That being said, what you have in front of you is really the foresight of Mr. Smith and his department on really projecting, this goes out to 2030, but he actually has a 50-year plan. So if we're asking what our priorities over the next couple of years, what's really scary, I think it's on page 2, is that we haven't opened up the building yet, but we're already projecting when we're going to need renovations for McCarthy. So again, I think that's the foresight that Mr. Smith is looking at of what it's going to take over the next couple of years on what are small projects, and I say small projects might be $500,000 to $1 million to complete renovations in schools such as Mount Pleasant, Amherst. We're coming on the 25th anniversary of both high schools. So again, I appreciate the words of in the the plans for the librarian, like that's one building, and Mr. Smith is controlling 20 buildings. So again, it's just not one project that we're looking at. There's always going to be the next thing. Once we address one building, what's the next project? And again, I think we're really fortunate to have the foresight and the support of the JSSBC to actually start funding these projects. So I'm going to let Mr. Smith go a little more into detail on how we envision the next couple of years, some of the projects that are on here, and from his point of view, those top 4 or 5 kind of priorities. Mr. Smith? Yeah, sorry.
Good evening, Sean Smith, Plant Operations Director. This document I handed out, the first page is a look at the capital projects. So when I view capital projects, it's generally over $500,000 and up. And then the second 2 pages, two-sided page is our deferred maintenance. So that's historically in the past, we've got $100,000 a year. When you have a plant the size of ours, that just doesn't cut it long-term. I physically bundled a bunch of deferred maintenance projects when it came time to do some of the bonded projects we've done, because we had so much to do in those schools. So it's important. And that's why I have on the first page, so on the capital page, I've listed first the projects that are ongoing. You're already familiar with these. It's the middle school project, Pennachuck, McCarthy. We finished Fairgrounds already. Maine Dunstable and Birch Elementary Schools are underway as we speak. Those will be done in the fall of 2025. So everything else on this page, for the most part, exactly what I presented to the Capital Improvement Committee a month or so ago. So it's the same orders, same priorities. I have interjected a few things or updated some numbers as I get more information. So our first priority is deferred maintenance. I mean, that's kind of our lifeblood. That's what keeps our schools operating in between the capital projects. The second thing is the security vestibule project. So there's an ongoing project for that. We're actively doing Dr. Crisp as we speak. We received the bids for new SERLs. Those are well above our available budget. So we sent the architect back to redo the design. And that has just barely got off the ground. We've kind of agreed on the approach, how to do it much cheaper, and he's just starting to put pen to paper. Would expect a fall or so, we'd probably have that number. And Mount Pleasant is the third school, well, new Searles. Mount Pleasant's the third school we'd like to do at some point, but we're waiting on other factors to determine if we'd actually do that. So Stello Stadium. Park and Rec actually maintains that for the school department. And one of the things they do every year is they conduct some hardness tests on the turf. So it's called a GMAX test. They determine there are certain parts of the field that are extremely hard right now. There's also data out there that all the sports injuries that occur, 10% of them are concussions that occur generally when your head hits the ground. So it's something to take note of. The turf itself is about 12 years old now. I believe when we installed it, we were saying it'd last about 10. So we've got our money's worth. I don't know if you ever get up close to turf, but think of it, if this was a blade of grass, a single blade of grass right here, over time, that's what happens. All those the blade splits apart into many little pieces. So that's what's happening with the current turf. This number of 1.5 million also includes some additional fencing, repair to the press box, perhaps a new roof above the locker rooms and places like that. If you have questions as I go along, please feel free to.
I do have a question on the turf. So as we talk with Public Works about these various fields, it has come, there is some thinking that artificial turf now is not as safe as they used to think because of the PFAS and all that in it. Do you think it would be worthwhile or to convert it to natural grass?
And we actually considered that 20 years ago or so when it was built. But there's so much use on the field. You got 3 high schools that use it as their primary field for all the rectangular field sports. You've got other civic groups that also use it. And most of the use is in the spring or the fall, which tends to be the wetter of the two seasons around the year. We don't use it at all in the wintertime when there's snow on the ground. So part of the reason we went to artificial was because of all that constant pounding we anticipate. I mean, I like natural grass as well. I mean, all the rest of the schools have natural grass. But just for the pounding that they would take, I'm not so sure it's the best.
You'd need more practice fields, is what you're saying, to spread out the use.
Potentially, yeah, because the high schools do use it to practice in as well every single day.
Yeah.
So that definitely couldn't happen if it was a grass field.
Just, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Just quick clarifying question. I note that you said, it looks like FY '24, but, understanding you have $1 million set aside, but does that include Mount Pleasant Elementary School? Or would Mount Pleasant Elementary School be in addition to that $1 million?
That is the amount that, so we started with 2 million. And for Dr. Chris, I think we're going to end up spending about 1.5 million, give or take. So we're going to have some money left over from that, and we'll put that towards new Searles, and we think that plus the $1 million will get us there.
And that would include Mount Pleasant,
It
if
would
you were
not
to.
include Mount Pleasant.
No.
So this 1 million does not include whatever happens with Mount Pleasant, fine. But this 1 million would not include a Mount Pleasant.
Correct.
Okay.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You answered it, but I just want clarification on the security vestibule, because if I look at your spreadsheet, that $1 million isn't in fiscal year '25, I don't think. It's in fiscal year '24, but you're saying that $1 million that's on that line item is gonna go to new Searles for the security vestibule. And you're gonna take the $500,000 that you're not using for Dr. Crisp, combine that with $1 million, and spend it in fiscal year 2025.
Yes.
Okay, so that $1 million should bump over?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
I think I put it there, that's just when the project started.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, the security vestibule project, we haven't got the new price on new Searles yet. The original price was way out of whack, because they were gonna add on to the front of the building. Now we're taking 2 classrooms, so we're not doing as much structural work. So we don't know what that price is going to be, but the Dr. Crisp is 1.3 in project cost, plus a couple $100,000 for the architect. The architect's fees are over all the schools, not just Dr. Crisp. So the other thing that I'm gonna be putting in legislation in shortly, after checking with the treasurer, is we're gonna take the 200,000 left over from Franklin Street and transfer that into the security vestibule project. And we're hoping that in doing that, I can't tell because I don't know what the design's gonna cost yet, but I'm hoping the increase in money that we need is somewhere between $700K and $1 million. And I think that's where the $1 million came from. It's gonna be a lot less expensive than the original alternative, but we don't know the price yet. But we're trying to minimize whatever additional bond money we would need for the security vestibule project.
Okay, is there another?
All right,
So-
go ahead,
Okay.
please.
So those initials, LSE, FG, that's Ledge Street, Fairgrounds, and Charlotte Avenue. A few years ago, when we were looking at doing Birch Hill and Main Dunstable, the original plan was to use ESSER fundings to install dehumidification or improve the ventilation in those 3 schools, in the back section of the school and the middle section. So if you view the school as a T, it's 2 cross pieces. Middle section includes the library, gymnasium, music, art, that sort of thing. We put dehumidification in all the rest of the school 2011, 12, give or take. So the rest of the school has not had it, and As I said, RESSER fundings were supposed to pay for that, but when Birch Hill and Main Dunstable came up, we decided, okay, to make those things work, to make those two projects work, we needed to postpone this work. So that funding disappeared. So that's why I reinserted it into our plan here.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, one other thing is, and part of the deferred maintenance that he's showing here is $350,000 for a facilities analysis, much like we just funded last year or this year for the fire department. They have 200 and some odd thousand to do 6 buildings, an assessment. Mr. Smith has 20 buildings, and they have a pretty good idea of what all these buildings need. However, this study would nail that down and develop a comprehensive plan, so we know what needs to be done, and then we can schedule when we get it done over the next many years, not just this year or 5 years. It's, as he mentioned, he's put in the McCarthy School, but that's in 2035, 54?
Yep.
So, long way down the stream. Also, if you look at the numbers, you'll see the renovations of the high school are only like 25 million. When we built the high schools, we built them to last. And it wouldn't need a complete overhaul like we've done with some of our other schools. And the reason we've had to do some of those major overhauls on the elementary school is because the school department never had enough deferred maintenance funds to keep up with all the things. And, you know, it's the old question of I could spend $100 an hour, I could spend $10,000 a couple of years from now. You know, one year, Sean got $100,000 from the budget, and we had to replace one pump at the high school. It was $90,000. So I had to take the Board of Aldermen, the Board of Education, through the HIVAC system in the high schools to show them just how complex that system is. So when we look at those numbers for renovation of the high schools, we're not talking about renovating the HIVAC systems because they're gonna last a long time. So there's a lot in these numbers, and questions can come up later, but this sheet that he has developed here could be a lot more concise if we perhaps take end of the year funding somewhere and fund that study like we did with the fire department. And we have a much more comprehensive analysis of all the facilities the school has. It's 20 facilities, 18 schools, the central office, and the plant ops building. So it's over $1 billion in infrastructure, and $100,000, any Rain Man wants to do the math, it's minuscule.
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be as blunt as I have a couple comments here. One is, has this idea and so on been blessed by your Board of Ed? It's going to be my first question. And my second one is, and this is where I'm going to be blunt, we all know how I feel about Mount Pleasant. We all know that that is the unspoken thing in this room, but also apparently something else that's on the table is Amherst Street. So I look at these two schools, I see that you have this into your FY '27, '28, and FY '30 budget of $200,000, $20 million, and $15 million. When I'm looking at the bottom line and trying to figure out where we need to put our money and so on, I really would like a decision from your Board of Ed and through management as to exactly what it is you're going to need, what really is going to exist. If you talk about closing those schools, you've already done some kind of moving the students around for whatever the outcome is that you're hoping for. But I find it hard to look at this and say, okay, you need all these. You put Mount Pleasant Elementary on hold. We talk about that 1 million really going into FY '25. I don't feel like these numbers are real. I really wish, and I'm not holding anybody that's standing there accountable, well, somewhat. But I really want to know what your Board of Ed decision is onto what these things are before I can make a decision. And the truth be known, and I'll put it out here, you've worked on 5 to 6 schools since I've been an alderman. Between building schools, renovating schools, and so on. So I do have a hard time saying we have a library that needs to be replaced and so on. And your trying to dance around with what schools are gonna stay open, what schools aren't gonna stay open, who's gonna be in what. I remember way back when we talked about trying to even out student population within the 3 middle schools. Now suddenly Pennachuck is almost filled to capacity and the other 2 aren't quite as even. So I'm getting a little anxious. I really want to know what your Board of Ed is saying, and I know the president's here and I don't want to put her on the spot, but I want to know what their plan is. We asked the library to come back with a real prioritization, and I love the fact you've given us this prioritization, but I find it somewhat insulting to see Mount Pleasant and Amherst Street here after hearing you're considering closing those. And then I heard the bad word of to build a new one, which doesn't give me the warm and fuzzy, so I'm going to put it out there. Thank you.
Well, to answer your first question, the Board of Ed did approve the capital improvement plan,
Good.
which included, I think, 10 projects, which is most of what you see in front of you. So that piece has taken place. As far as Mount Pleasant,
Yeah, and I'll come back, and I think, as you said, it's the elephant in the room. And I think I'm really happy to have this ad hoc committee, but I think it's equally important, as we had the conversation last year about Mount Pleasant, that we're all in agreement. So we can say it's a Board of Ed decision, it's a city decision. We have a plan, right? The mayor has rolled out what we envision, and we're doing Define Nashua right now. What is together the plan of Nashua? What does it look like? So we can say it's a Board of Ed decision, it's a Board of Aldermen decision, because I can equally come back and say, if I'm not getting $25 million, I'm going to close the school. We're not going to keep it open, and we could play the chicken and the egg game. But really, I think if we look at Define Nashua, or where, like the building going in the city planning, our numbers are saying our population is going to be 9,400 kids in 2032, down from 13,000 in the same amount of buildings. If that's our numbers, it doesn't make sense to keep all the buildings open. And so I think as a city, we need to come to agreement. We see building coming up. Do we agree upon the numbers? In 2040, as a city, and how we're attracting families and retaining families, do we have a plan together? Is there going to be a capital investment in either our buildings, whether it's Mount Pleasant, Amherst Street, or we're saying together a comprehensive plan, this is how we envision our schools looking like in the next 15 years, and this is how we're going to get there. It's not purely a Board of Education, with all due respect, a Board of Education decision. That's a major investment on how we're going to attract and retain families in this district. Our numbers, and we presented it last year, and we got pushback. We don't believe the consultant's numbers, and it was not only Mr. Smith's, the other Mr. Smith, his numbers and the NASDAQ numbers to say we have a declining enrollment. 2 different sources, and we got pushback saying we don't believe that. We have new apartments coming in. We have new developments coming in. Let's stop working in isolation and come up together saying, these are the numbers we agree upon, and what's our plan to address it? Because I think, again, the Board of Education, the Board of Aldermen, the Mayor's office, if we can, again, be in agreement to say, this is what we want to do with the schools, whether it's Mount Pleasant, Amherst Street, we can talk about, Director Cummins just say, are we looking at renovating like schools, or the same thing with the library? Or together as a community, do we want to build a new school? Fewer and newer schools. But again, we need to be on the same page. If we just say this is a Board of Education decision, I'm sorry, I think it needs to be a comprehensive approach. It needs to be together, all the departments working together on how are we going to support this community. So if we want to close it based on our numbers, I mean, if you're going to ask, is $25 million into Mount Pleasant a worthy investment? There's 220 kids in that building.
Mr. Mayor, can
All right, Mr. Cummings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize, I got a little lost. I think maybe we jumped ahead a little bit, so I just want to clarify a couple things. Looking at your spreadsheet here, just roughly, it looks as though you're suggesting over a 5-year horizon, spending potentially $60 million. And that's broken out in certain ways, but then I think it's really coming down to a conversation about $20 million for what is looking like design and pre-construction in FY '28 for, looks like New Cerros, or maybe that's Mount Pleasant, and I just,
No.
is that where we're at? And I'd want to kind of see if we could get some clarification on that before we proceed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's two different questions, but.
Well, I think you're correct. So through this whole process, I worked closely with Alderman Dowd and the Joint Special, of course, and he's involved in all the other budget issues in the city. He said, you know, we spent a lot of money on schools, and we have. I've been very happy with the money that we've done a lot in the last 10 years. But you have other departments you have to take care of. You have the fire department, police, all the other libraries. So he kind of indicated to me that, okay, we need to push things back a little bit. You know, we're looking towards the end of the 2020s to do our next school. So I accepted that. I think we accepted that. And that's why you have projects that show up in 2029, 2030. And that's where I stuck them. So I think, Tim, you're correct. We're not looking at that big number. We're looking at a smaller number to get us through the next 4 or 5 years. If and when the decision is made on Mount Pleasant, that'll get filtered in. I haven't heard anything about Hammer Street being closing, but that's just me. Anything to add to that one? Did I answer your question, Tim?
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I mean, I'm going to start, you know, and Superintendent Andre, you know I haven't been a big fan of yours. I mean, if you read the papers, they quoted me in there, so that's clear. It's not going to be something I'm hiding behind, but I've talked to, you know, past school board members. A couple of them came to me. One called me and said, you know, you got to give this guy a chance. He's a good guy. But then I hear the same stuff. Alderman Clee brings up stuff, and right away you turn around and you say, well, it's not the Board of Education, it's not me, you guys did it. None of us were involved in any of those conversations. I would be happy to have Board of Aldermen and Board of Ed decide on what schools, and maybe the Joint Special does that, I don't know. Didn't sound like it. And so you turn the question back on Alderman Clee and said, oh, we gotta work together, but you haven't been working with us. You have not been transparent in a lot of the things that you've done. And we have spent money. And I wasn't gonna get mad about this, but we have given a lot of money. We just gave you $4.5 million extra dollars because you guys didn't spend it the way we expected it to be spent. So yeah, we have given a lot of money. And I look at this and I thought, you know, Alderman Dowd keeps telling us, he comes up here and he goes, yeah, wait, we've done the schools, we've done the schools, we've done the schools. Good, because I want to put some money towards fire departments. I want to put money towards libraries and a lot of the other infrastructure in this city that needs work. So then I look at this and I say, oh, we just did Pennachuck, but we got $4 million here for Pennachuck? And then we get $20 million for Mount Pleasant. Well, that's not been decided, apparently, because we don't know what's going to happen. And Amherst Street, that's the first time I hear now we're closing Amherst Street. So obviously there's not transparency there between the boards unless the Joint Special is not coming to this board and telling us what's going on. Maybe that's the case, I don't know. You would have to tell me. But I just want you guys to be transparent with us and tell us what's going on. This is a lot of money, And I know we get a lot of schools, and I'm a supporter of the schools. I have kids, I've had kids go through the school system. I have a kid in the school system now. So obviously, I want to work together. I think we should work together. But it doesn't sound like you guys are always going this way with us. And it doesn't always sound like the Board of Ed is going this way with us. So if there's a way to do that, that would be great. But, you know, this is a lot of money to spend. And I think, you know, we continue to spend it on schools, and I think we have to find a way to also take care of some of the other infrastructure. And I mean, fire departments are falling apart too. And I would like to see some of those fixed. There's a floor that's gonna fall down in the Amherst Street Fire Station. So it would be nice to send some money those places as well. So that's my points about it. And like I said, I wasn't gonna say anything, but then Alderman Clee obviously brought it up, and I didn't really like your response to that, so, sorry.
Shall I continue?
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay, where was I? So we, I'd say 2012 or so, we installed a district-wide access control system across all the schools, security cameras, ability to check in, to buzz in, to be buzzed in by the secretaries. A lot went into that. I believe it was around $2.5 million. So that, those systems are now 12 years old. Cameras are starting to fail. The recording devices are starting to fail. So we need to reinvest some money in it. It can be done through deferred maintenance, but because it was $500,000 for a couple of years, I put the items here. We have been doing very well with the state as far as getting grants. There's been a lot of grant money coming in, but this is above and beyond what we get through that system.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. Not to pick at the scab, but I will. Mount Pleasant. It was my understanding back last year, the Board of Ed punted on the decision on whether to close it, and they were going to retake up that decision in 2 years. So my question is around the timing. So if they make a decision, that would be, I guess, in fiscal year 25, and you have 20 million allocated 1, 2, 3 fiscal years later to start construction. My only question is around the timing. Shouldn't that be brought in a little bit more?
Mhm.
Maybe move it up 2 years?
Again, I think Mr. Smith kind of answered that. Like, that was the original, but I think we were listening to the community, and again, like the needs of whether fire departments or hearing the cycle. I mean, we'd be more than happy to move it up. But we also know there's other needs, whether it's fire department or other demands on the city. Again, a lot of money has been coming to the schools, but if we could move it up, but I know there's a burden on the city if we said, here's another 20 million project in a bond year, so.
So just, if I could just follow up. Really, it should be done earlier, but you're just saying you're just looking
Based on
beyond.
the feedback that we got,
Got it.
Mr. Smith said, like we heard from, through the different projects that there's other projects ahead of the Mount Pleasant.
Yep.
I mean, if we could get a $20 million bond next year and we knew that, I think that also helps us in the conversation on, are we keeping the school open or not? So I think where some hesitation on the Board of Education is if we vote to keep the school open and there's no bond money for 10 years, how are we investing in the school at that point, right? And so that's where I think that's where I'm asking the joint, like coming together, whether it's 10 years or 5 years, how do you go back to the community saying we're keeping the school open, but you're not going to get money for renovations until 2031?
Well,
That's or whatever that's going to
that has
be.
to go into the decision matrix for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Mayor. So forgive me for my lack of understanding on this one particular issue, and I'm hoping that you can provide some, I'm sure you can. So the deferred maintenance, when we're looking at that, is it called deferred because you don't have the money to do it, or is it something that you budget for? Like, so when I look at, like, it says deferred maintenance, fiscal year 25, 1.135 million. Is that in your budget for 2025, or is that something that you're hoping?
And where on the,
fund?
where are you
What page?
pointing?
I'm on the,
First page, like 4 or 5
the
minutes
first
down.
page here.
Right here.
Under priorities, it's number 1. It says
They
deferred
gave me
maintenance.
a
Right.
reverse thing.
Right, priority number 1. So is that, you're looking for 1.135 million in a bond, is that correct?
Well, that's the request, and I think the way the process works, the Board of Ed requests the money, it goes to the mayor's office next, and then ultimately the aldermen approve it. Somewhere in that process, I'm not expert on it, but it's been reduced every single year. And
And
the budget
again,
guy can talk about it better.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes, but what I believe Alderman Clemmons is trying to tease out is, are we using cash, or is that gonna be bond authorization necessary?
It
'Cause
goes
there's a-
into the operating budget.
So that answers the question.
So, okay, so the 1.135 million is within your operating budget?
No.
No, no. It would be, there's a deferred maintenance, school deferred maintenance line within the capital improvements budget, or within the
Okay.
what do we call that section?
Capital.
Yeah, capital improvement
projects.
section.
Call it the capital project section.
Capital project section.
Okay.
And there would need to be $1,135,000 on that line to fund all these projects. Now, the complaint, a valid one, is that we've tended to budget a very low number in that line. And when you see the budget coming up, I've done that again. You know, $100,000 isn't nearly enough, really, but we're trying to keep the budget down as much as we can, and that's,
So here's my question. Obviously, you know, you've said that this spreadsheet goes out all the way to 2050. We don't have that in front of us, but my question is this: at what point could we theoretically get a lot of these projects done? So like, if over the next 5 years, we gave you so much money to get all of this deferred maintenance done, is it possible that within that 5 years, you could build up a savings where we wouldn't have to do that in the future?
Well, if you're looking at all the deferred maintenance, it's $12 million. So with the constraints you're facing, I don't know that you can do that.
Theoretical question, let's say we
Yeah.
could do it. Let's say we gave you $12 million tomorrow. Could you save up enough cash within 5 years to then never have to come back to the Board of Aldermen and ask for deferred maintenance?
I don't think so, because as time goes on, building systems age. Eventually you have to replace boilers, so you're constantly adding to the list. I just, in the past month, I did a small contract to a consultant to look at 4 roofs: Bicentennial, New Searles, Crisp, Charlotte, and Ledge, 5 roofs. So once I get that information, you'll tell me, okay, in 2028, you should be replacing the Ledge Street roof, or at least a portion of it. That information is, you're constantly feeding deferred maintenance.
Okay.
So I guess the short answer is no, I don't think you can give me 12 million and then it goes away forever.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, the things that are on the deferred maintenance are things that have been identified that are, to use a term, broken and need to be fixed. Now, there is one thing on there, the study plan, which is $350,000, and I've talked to the mayor about perhaps funding that out of end-of-year funding. So you take that off, now you're at $600,000. There are a couple of items that I've talked to Sean about that might get pushed off, but $100,000 is not gonna cut it. So that'll become up during the budget season, and that money is in the budget and for deferred maintenance. Now, and I don't wanna cast any dispersions, but one thing, when we take the budget for the school department and give it to the school department, we lose all control over it. In past years, we've said that we took the money for deferred maintenance and put it in a contingency account, and then when they spend it for deferred maintenance, we gave them the money. That way, it can't be spent for anything else. So if you put a whole bunch of money into deferred maintenance, say millions, you'd have to be careful, safeguard how it's spent. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that they would do that deliberately.
I'm not sure of that. I think because the deferred maintenance line is outside the school budget. It's not within the school budget, it's within the city budget. So, we might still have, not that you're gonna spend deferred maintenance money on something else, I don't think that would happen, but I'm not sure that that would be possible. Mr. Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor. But following along the lines of what Alderman Clemmons is saying, and I'm going to take some liberties here, but I think it falls along his train of thought. Theoretically, we could, and I think the goal here is maybe to try not to raise as much money on the property tax base annually, and we could, in theory, on the monies that you potentially turn back to the city at the end of the year, transfer into like a capital reserve fund for these types of things that carry over year that you'd have access to. And that way that $12 million could potentially accrue over the years. Granted, it may never be enough because you're always adding on to that list. But what you're doing then is using money that's already been raised and appropriated in a way to help not raise another X amount of new tax dollars for this type of use.
Exactly. That, yes, that was exactly my point.
Now, it does all sort of, you pay the piper in the end, no matter what, in the sense that when money has come back from the school department, I think the last year or two, especially around COVID, the unexpended appropriations within the school department were fairly considerable. And Dan Donovan said, okay, well, how about if I spend half the money on something, I forget what, within the, I think it had to do with the servers or whatever, the internet access within various schools, as an example. What if we spend half of it on that and we return half it to the city? And Mr. Griffin, the CFO, was involved, and the answer was, okay, that sounds reasonable, you know? Now, where did that money go that we get back? Well, it goes to buy down the tax rate. So, you know, if we leave the money with the schools, I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but it does have a tax impact. So, in the end, the taxpayers pay, no matter how you do it, the taxpayers pay for everything, no matter what.
I guess I'd also add that the deferred maintenance money doesn't expire every year. If we don't spend it this year, it's still there next year. Whereas I believe the money we're talking about now, that expires at the end of your year.
We could, I mean, to sort of, I mean, I get what Alderman Clemmons is saying, which is that we should really try to be doing these projects. We should try to knock them off every year, you know, not do this $100,000 thing. I mean, we could bite the bullet and make that 100,000 $1 million, and just make that an annual appropriation, which would take care of a lot of these projects year by year by year by year, and less, in the long run, less would have to be borrowed and bonded, because these smaller projects would be completed in the short term. Alderman Clemmons.
Just a brief comment. I wish we could go back in time and tell the first Board of Aldermen who decided to put surplus towards the next year to not do it ever, because we wouldn't be in this situation today.
Well, you could kind of, you could gradually wean that situation, but Alderman Lopez.
We could also invest in a time machine with the extra money. So I wanted to address the, I think the more divisive concept, but draw attention to Alderman Dowd's comments. He had said that a district-wide building assessment, similar to what we did with the fire department, was something that he intended to put in the, was pursuing using excess revenues at the end of the year to pay for. And I would definitely support that as an alderman. And I would encourage the Board of Education to think about that before actualizing any intentions or plans or ideas about closing any of the schools. That's probably what you need, is you need the facilities assessment to confirm that there are some specific actors where it might actually make more sense to do what, you know, the library had said is a last step might be to shrink the library's footprint and look at a different way of doing it. I think maybe if the Board of Ed actually felt like there was some sort of confidence on our part that we could at least help them study the issue, that might make it a little bit more concrete, because in addition to this is basically my recollection, so nobody take it as gospel, but in addition to the study about the student use of Mount Pleasant and those discussions, I think part of the intent of the Board of Education at that time last year was to actually study the issue, and was to figure out what would an actual feasibility study look like in terms of what is the school's use. And if that would be, and I guess I defer to Alderman Dowd on this, if that's something that would be covered in a study that we as a Board of Aldermen have to fund, then I think there needs to be some sort of show for that, because I appreciate the mayor taking sole responsibility for reducing the deferred maintenance budget. We heard that earlier. But there's some confusion over whether the budgets that are presented to the mayor's office are approved by exclusively the mayor or the alderman. And the reality is, when the budget is presented to us, if the Board of Education says, this is what we agreed on with the mayor's office, but we actually do need more, and if aldermen could actually identify a dollar amount and a specific use it could be used for, we might be able to do things like contingency funds. But I don't think any of us are comfortable just saying, we think you need more, but you're saying you don't, so here's extra money. Because that's not a defensible action to the taxpayers. As someone who has for years, lobbied for increasing city welfare money, despite the city welfare department saying we actually don't need more, I can't actually make a motion if I don't have a dollar amount. So I think, at the very least, Alderman Dowd's proposal or suggestion is helpful for clearing up some of this, and to Dr. Andre's part, working a little bit more collaboratively. And at worst, if you don't think it's going to happen, at least we can talk about it at the budget and look at a contingency funding idea.
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with both my colleague from Ward 2 and from Ward 4 as far as using that money for the study and so on. I think that would be great. But I'm going to bring up that 4.5 million ESSER replacement money that we all talked about. And at that time, we said, well, there's going to be extra money or not used money from this bond, and there may be something extra from this bond that we could, one hasn't been sold, so we can't talk about it, but we might not need as much of this $8-point-something million. I really want to address that and make sure that that's taken care of. I mean, it took the wind out of the sails of a lot of taxpayers, and while the Board of Aldermen didn't get to make the decision as to what was happening with that money and so on, we took it in the shorts as much as anybody else did for approving that. So I really want to make sure that we cover it in some respects and reduce that $8 million bond that we have to. I'm really hoping that we do that as an alderman here, and that might mean something is going to have to go by the wayside, that we do that. But putting that out there, I do want to remind everybody that we only approve your bottom line. If you tell us you want whatever millions of dollars you want to do this, this, and this, and then you decide, no, I've got something else that's more important, and you do it, we don't get a say about that. So I know a few years back when I first became an alderman, you weren't there, Dr. Andre, but the Board of Ed came and said, we need to hire more paras. So what we did was we put money into a contingency fund, and as you hired those paras, we transferred the money over. So I would like to see maybe some more contingencies, not that we don't trust you, but an emergency or something, and you're going to shift funds, and we understand that that happens, but to make sure that next year they didn't come back and say we need more paras, we kind of took care of that. So I'm just putting that out there, and I would like to see, before you close any schools or try to build any schools, I would like to see an assessment, a complete assessment done by somebody who's a little bit more competent than you had before. So thank you.
Who, when you have money in deferred maintenance, let's assume you had enough, which I understand you don't, but let's assume you did. Who approves the expenditure of a particular amount on a particular project?
So we follow the same purchasing plan, 3 quotes, as many quotes as we can. The Board of Ed approves it.
So you would go to the Board of Ed for that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I sign it, and then I think somebody in City Hall signs it as well, after it goes through Dan.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, just a couple of points. One is, if we get the more comprehensive plan, we'll have a much better outlook on expenditures going forward. The other thing is, on deferred maintenance, if the things that are earmarked to get done don't get done, they get worse, and the cost goes up. Simple fact. And if they go up enough, because we haven't funded it, then you get into a major project, and we're doing a bond to fix a major problem. So the other thing is that I just want to cover how the joint special works, because I think there's some confusion. When the Board of Ed has any kind of a building project, they determine amongst themselves whether they want to send it, and it's usually anything over $1 million, to send it to the joint special to manage. Comes to the joint special, which is 5 aldermen, 5 Board of Ed members, vote on it, and they accept it. Now it's in the purview of the joint special and not the school department anymore. And as chairman, I take the request for the bond and process the legislation to get the bond through. Once we have the money, then we go forward with the building project. So that's how the joint special works. And we've sort of pretty much set that up with the other departments. It's a little different, but it's fairly working the same way. So, you know, the question is, if once we have the study, we'll have a much better idea on further deferred maintenance downstream. On the old high school, when we changed it into the new South High School, there were things in there that should have been handled by deferred maintenance that weren't. They had air handlers that were rusted shut. Never worked for a long time. When we get done, we could only save 2 things, stairwells and 1 wall. Alderman McCarthy and I had many discussions about we should have just torn the whole thing down and built another north, but that's a story for another day. So, you know, I've always been, I was in logistics for 30, 40 years, and planning ahead is something the military does all the time, because if they didn't, they'd be costing a lot more than they cost now. You know, we would determine on a weapon system how much we needed for spares for the next 20, 30, 40 years. But anyway, the key is that the plan can be funded outside of a bond. We don't need to do a bond. We can do somehow end-of-year funding, and that'll give us a lot of great information. The other thing I wanted to point out is over the last 2 years or more, the school budget comes through the budget committee, it's $100,000, and the budget committee has seen fit to add additional monies to it. I want to say this year was 400,000. And we get, and believe me, they spend it judiciously because they don't have enough. You know, if we funded them $1 million, that'd be one thing, but, or the 600,000, but they never have enough. So they hit the highest priority things. And also, things change. You know, you might have security cameras go down tomorrow that are gonna put a school in jeopardy. Whoops, instead of doing this, I'm gonna fix the cameras. So Mr. Smith has that leeway with deferred maintenance money, but that's the money to fix the things that need to be fixed and to cover the things that are unknown. And if we don't give enough money, that's when we get into much larger projects downstream.
You know, if the Board of Aldermen were to appropriate more to deferred maintenance, and it's not actually, that line is not within the school operating budget, it is in the capital improvements budget, but, you know, there could be a mechanism developed that required kind of joint approval of these projects. You know, if you were spending $1 million a year, and if the board wanted to have a little more insight or oversight into that process. Anyway, Alderwoman Klee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's probably kind of on the same idea of what you just said, but Alderman Dowd said something that kind of hit me. If we fund for ABC to happen and suddenly you have an emergency, he cited cameras or something like that, and now you're gonna take the ABC funding and put it over to there. What is the mechanism? Mr. Smith, do you just say that, or the Board of Ed has to anoint that change in your use of funds?
It'll go to the Board of Ed.
Okay, so that's all I just wanted to make sure, is that this isn't on your head. And then suddenly somebody says, why didn't ABC happen? I just want to make sure there was a mechanism. I do like what the mayor said on if it was something small, you know, like a $100,000 project, you don't have to keep coming to the Board of Aldermen for that. But to support the Board of Ed, I would like to see larger projects have to come through in a joint way, whether it be the joint special or of some sort. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Cummings.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, this building assessment study that we're talking about, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's about $350,000. You have it programmed in FY '25 as part of your 1.135 million in deferred capital
Correct.
maintenance?
Yes.
And so, I guess the question at hand is there monies available to do that project, to do that study, to do that project?
I mean, if you give it to me, yes.
And so the idea would be is for that to be prioritized in FY '25's
Yes.
deferred capital maintenance.
Just real quickly, if we authorize the 1.3, whatever it is, for deferred maintenance, he has the money in that to pay for it. If we cut that number down to 100,000, he doesn't have the money to pay for it, we'll have to pay for it a different way.
Yes, Alderman Dow, that's what I was trying to drive at, yeah. And may I summarize, just to make sure I'm understanding where we're at here, because I think we have public health that still needs to go, but essentially, and we have CFO Griffin in the back of the room who can correct me if I'm wrong, I heard an alderman last night use a very good phrase, looking at this in terms of credit card and our checkbook, and trying to understand how much money we have. And so from that perspective, we're looking at approximately having $150 million over the next 5 years. Of that $150 million, I believe we already have some monies authorized, which brings us down to about $120 million available. And so out of that $120 million available, understanding there's $20 million that we still need to figure out, and that's relative to Mount Pleasant, but $60 million of that 120 is essentially what we're talking about here, and maybe that might be less or more depending on how things go. Is that a fair synopsis or summary?
If you're including Mount Pleasant.
I am for
Yes.
this conversation.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Just Mount Pleasant, by the way, I mean, that's the one school we've had assessments done. That was already taken care of by an architect. Costs were developed by a construction manager, so we're pretty confident with those numbers.
All right, Alderman Clemmons.
Well, then, that's not what I'm reading. What was just said is not what I'm reading. Because what I have here is FY '30, 16 million for bicentennial. Then FY '31, 15 million for Amherst Street. FY '32, Nashua High North. So this goes beyond 2030. So it's not in the next 5 years, there's $150 million.
60.
$60 million?
$60
I thought you said 150 million. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah. So 150 million is essentially what 30 million would be year over year for this group's conversation. Then the school department's request essentially is approximately 60 million. That includes Mount Pleasant. And what we also know is we already have money authorized, so out of that 150, we're really at 120. And so that's approximately where we're at.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you had just said.
All right, so do you have more to present, or is it?
You can read it. It's pretty self-explanatory. I covered the first 5 priorities. The rest of them were.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Smith or Superintendent Andrews? If not, thank you very much. I think we get the picture. So we will move to Public Health and Community Services. And I think everyone knows LaTanya, right?
Hi, good evening. My name is LaTanya Musioli. I am the Housing Services Officer with the Division of Public Health and Community Services. So I will be presenting our project on behalf of Public Health.
Is it here?
It's a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have the clicker, or do you need me to change?
I have it.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right. So our project is a resource center that also serves as a joint shelter and transitional housing for the city of Nashua. So the project name will be the Nashua Shelter and Resource Center. This request for funding will support the construction of a facility that would support sheltering of those experiencing homelessness and provide on-site resources and services to address the social determinants of health. These resources and services would be provided by various community-based organizations and the City of Nashua Division of Public Health and Community Services. Okay. So this slide here depicts Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a motivational theory. Maslow is a psychologist. This theory suggests that humans, our behavior is motivated by basic needs being met. So as you can see on the bottom of the pyramid here, these are our most basic physiological needs. That includes breathing, food, water, shelter, clothing, and sleep. So our individuals in our community that are experiencing homelessness likely are experiencing this first level here of their basic needs of sheltering not being met. Until these physical needs are met, individuals cannot focus on or motivate themselves to put effort into higher levels on the pyramid, such as health or employment. It is critical for basic human needs to be met in order for individuals to achieve better health outcomes, secure employment, share a sense of connection with others, and become productive members of society. Housing is one of the most basic human needs and is a social determinant of health. On the next slide, you will see how homelessness negatively impacts one's health.
You have to point it in.
Point it.
Yeah, point it, yeah.
I'm like, it's not working. Thank you. So homelessness is closely linked to health disparities, as individuals experiencing homelessness often face heightened vulnerability to physical and mental health challenges. The lack of stable housing exposes them to harsh weather conditions, increasing the risk of illness such as hypothermia. Additionally, limited access to proper nutrition and sanitation facilities contributes to malnutrition and higher prevalence of infectious disease. Mental health is significantly impacted, with homelessness being associated with higher rates of depression, anxiety, and substance use disorder. Moreover, the absence of consistent health care access exacerbates existing health issues, creating a cycle of vulnerability. People experiencing homelessness often have co-occurring conditions that could possibly be the cause of their homelessness or the result from their homelessness. So as you can see, there's some statistics here on the slide, and these are data highlights from 2022. We do a community health assessment at Public Health, so all of this data, you can see the more updated numbers on our website. But 37% of individuals experiencing homelessness also identified as having a mental health disorder. 24% of individuals experiencing homelessness identified as having a mental health or physical disability. 15% of people experiencing homelessness reported having a chronic health condition, and 9% of people experiencing homelessness reported having some sort of substance use or problem. Community need. So as seen on this slide, you'll see that homelessness continues to increase. New Hampshire as a whole had a 52% increase in homelessness between 2022 and 2023. RKG Associates conducted a Nashua housing study in 2020, and they identified that the city of Nashua will need to add 4,769 units to accommodate population growth by 2030. While housing developments throughout the city are underway, the developments are not being completed fast enough to meet the growing need. So we know that there's a low vacancy rate for Hillsborough County, 0.6%. Nashua has a population of over 91,000 people, and it's expected to continue growing. Our current homeless shelters, so there are 3 privately owned shelters, have a total of 94 beds for singles and 4 family pods. We know this number is not sufficient to meet the current need and the anticipated future needs based on expected population growth. Every year, we complete the point-in-time count, which is a requirement from Housing and Urban Development. And this is a requirement of all COCs, so Nashua, Greater Nashua Continuum of Care. And this year, we identified that there were 33 unsheltered individuals and 327 sheltered individuals. So sheltered homelessness would be considered individuals living in homeless shelters, safe havens. They may have been at a transitional housing, and then unsheltered are the individuals living outside. We do know that this number is an underrepresentation of what's actually occurring, because individuals who are couch surfing during this time would not count as being homeless, but they still don't have a fixed address. Individuals that may have been in the emergency room that are typically homeless, and they maybe were admitted to the hospital, they wouldn't be counted. So we do know this is an underrepresentation. We also completed the point of time count in, I want to say, end of January this year. So the weather conditions, there was snow on the ground. So due to terrain, unsafe weather conditions, and just individuals being in expected encampment sites that were too unsafe for our volunteer counters to get to, we know that this number is an underrepresentation. Our overnight warming station that we were hosting at the UU Church, this was a temporary warming station for individuals because a lot of the shelters were operating at capacity. So the city had decided to provide an overnight warming station that would allow individuals to come in, warm up, and the goal was to not have any deaths related to weather this winter, which we didn't have, which was great. So the warming station did serve its purpose. But we did have 97 guests in the month of March. So as you can see, that number is 3 times higher than what we were able to count at the point in time. So we do know that there's more than 33 unsheltered individuals currently within the city. Housing instability continues to cost money. So as you can see, there's some figures there regarding the city welfare housing expenditures. So for general assistance, there was $519,000 spent so far this fiscal year. $475,000 of that was directed towards rental costs, and that includes apartment rental assistance and motel costs, with motel costs coming in at approximately $78,000. Right now, our numbers are approximately at the same number that they were in the last fiscal year, and we still have 2 months left. So I'm anticipating that number will be higher. All right. I know, it just feels more comfortable to point it at the TV. Additional community challenges. So the number of individuals experiencing homelessness and the amount of money being spent related to housing instability warrants the need for additional support. So the current shelters are operating at capacity. The Nashua Soup Kitchen and Shelter had some emergency additional beds that were open, but those closed on April 30th in addition to the overnight warming station. Individuals that may be exited from shelter programs for various reasons and for different lengths of time may be unable to access additional supports offered through shelters such as laundry facilities and showers. So we know that these are huge needs for our unhoused population. Homelessness impacts the community and multiple city departments. The public library is currently facing challenges with the number of unhoused people using their restrooms inappropriately and utilizing the library inappropriately. The public library is listed as a warming and cooling station, as you guys saw during their earlier presentation, and is open for the public. The library has recently hired security guards due to increased behavioral and safety concerns, and we've also received some reported concerns from the Nashua Transit Department related to individuals inappropriately utilizing their bathrooms to wash up as well. The hope is that having a resource center and shelter may alleviate some of this. This will give one specific location for our unhoused population to go and receive supports and services where staff are trained to mitigate some behavioral concerns that may be occurring. The faces of homelessness are diverse. We're seeing an increase in the number of elderly people experiencing homelessness and housing instability, and we're also seeing a number of people that are sheltering in their vehicles. We're seeing individuals living in encampment sites or sleeping on the concrete, also known as rough sleepers. The emergency overnight warming station served as a drop-in location where people could come inside and warm up in a safer environment. Due to its closing, folks are back outside. There was also the recent closure of Stepping Stones, which is a organization in Nashua that focused on supporting youth homelessness through a drop-in center and transitional housing. While the Nashua Shelter and Resource Center wouldn't serve as just youth-specific supports, some supports that were offered at the drop-in center that Stepping Stones was operating would be open here for individuals to use, and they could certainly access the laundry facilities, on-site case management, as well as showers and sheltering. So I'm going to show a couple of slides with some rough pictures of what we're hoping for the Resource Center and Shelter to look like. So the proposed Nashua Shelter and Resource Center will be constructed as a 3-story building that will serve as a drop-in and community resource center, shelter, and transitional housing units. So the first floor would serve as the Resource Center, and in the Resource Center there would be offices for off-site providers, so any community partners that provide services to individuals that are unhoused would be able to utilize the space. We would also have washers and dryers available for laundry. The facility would also provide needed lockers for individuals to store their belongings. There would be public restrooms for folks to use and shower facilities. Those would be on the second floor. In addition, to improve access to services and closed loop referrals, we would have a behavioral health specialist on site as well as a community health worker, and our community health workers are trained in homeless outreach. And the third floor would be transitional living. So here's a rough outline of the first floor. So again, there's the bathrooms, tables for folks to sit in. So this would be 24/7 operational. Individuals would come in here and be able to utilize this as a warming and cooling station in addition to a resource center. Again, there's the storage. They'd be able to do their laundry as well. And the goal is for folks to come in, engage, and eventually become permanently housed via the supports that would be offered at the Resource Center. Here's the second floor. So this would host 30 shelter beds, emergency shelter beds for men and women. There are 4 bathrooms outlined on this floor, one of them being ADA compliant. One of the biggest issues in New Hampshire is the lack of shelter capacity for individuals with disabilities. So our model would not utilize the traditional bunk bed models. It would be standalone beds so that folks that may have a physical impairment are able to access them, and as well as access the restrooms and showers. There would be staff on site on this floor, but this would only be during the overnight sheltering hours. Folks would not be allowed to stay up here throughout the day. They would be referred to the drop-in center or hopefully out working or doing other things and engaging in services. There's additional storage space up here as well, and that would be for the folks that are staying in the shelter. But again, these bathrooms would be open to the public. Third floor would be transitional housing units. So there would be 6 single studio rooms and then 2 studio apartments for couples. We'd also have a little office for recovery support services on this floor. So this is a rough estimate of our total project costs. We're looking at $3.8 million total for the project. And this is just a breakdown of what that would look like. And then we looked at operational costs. So this would include staffing. So ideally, we would have at least 4 staff on 24/7. So it would be 2 staff in the shelter section, and then we would have 2 staff at the overnight warming area for folks. It would include utilities, maintenance, supplies, liability insurance, different administrative fees. And we're looking at sustainability as well. So there's a few grants that we are hoping to tap into in terms of capital and ongoing. So that would be Emergency Solutions Grant, and we would utilize that for our street outreach team, and housing stabilization, Community Health Worker Equity Grant, grants through New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. We did submit a proposal to HUD for the Community Development Fund grant. We also have some opioid abatement money that would be used for this, as we would directly be serving individuals that have substance use disorder. And we're hoping to provide some Medicaid services on site. So that would include youth peer support, recovery support, different peer supports, group supports, and group recovery support. So again, we'll have our behavioral health specialists on site. And then the top floor with the transitional housing units, those folks would be providing some sort of rent. It would be at a lower amount than they would have elsewhere, because we're really hoping for this to be transitional housing for these folks to be able to save some money, receive supports that are necessary in order to become successful, gain more permanent housing, and hopefully sustain some employment.
You want to ask a question?
Yeah, just,
Yep.
Alderwoman Clee.
just a quick question. When you were talking about those grants, and so on, are you looking at those, when you refer to them as sustainability grants, towards the operational cost? Is that what you're looking at those? Or to be able to increase programming? Obviously, it's not going to come across the $3.8 million total project, and to that end, do you already have a building in mind, or, okay.
So we're looking, so the HUD funding would be more for capital. So it would be to help us either develop or refurbish an existing property. The Emergency Solutions Grant, Community Health Worker Grant, and the Medicaid ones, that would be for like operating costs. Opioid abatement might be able to be used for both.
Okay, thank you.
And then the transitional housing rent would be for operational.
And you have a location in mind?
So we have a couple that we're looking into, but we haven't secured a location at this time.
And I'm not gonna ask you, I don't wanna ruin anything, any
Thank you.
negotiations you're trying, so, thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
Two questions. The first, hopefully quick. The ESG grant was, I think, formerly used by Maple Street before it closed, and I believe it is used by the Soup Kitchen. Is the ESG grant something that is region-specific and there's a finite pool, or is it something that if you have a project, you could apply for support and the state would then pick it? Like, would we be literally creating a competitor for existing shelters?
I'm not entirely sure. I know that it's a DHHS funded grant, but I'm not sure if it's region-specific or if it's just any projects could utilize it.
And then the second question I had was, when I was working at Maple Street, and then later at Greater Nashua, we were exploring a low-barrier shelter model, which included the involvement of a licensed clinical social worker and participation by a medical doctor. And it was the understanding of both organizations as they were pursuing it that in addition to some of the Medicaid billable services you were talking about, some other services that staff might be doing, such as functional supports, case management, and that kind of stuff might be also reimbursable. Given the population that would be staying there, you'd have a pretty large client population. Has that been looked at as a possible supportive revenue stream?
We have looked at different Medicaid reimbursable services, but we haven't teased out completely all of the different staff that we're looking to have support this project.
I think one of the complexities that was really hard to navigate is you had to have one of the specific types of public health clinic. I can't remember that terminology exactly, and I think that license for this area might be taken by somebody, so that was what it kept happening, but it might be something to look at, is if you were able to install a clinic, then you'd have the qualification as far as Medicaid is considered to bill for other services too.
Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. I wrote down 1.69 million to operate. wouldn't some of these funds be offset by a savings from the welfare department? Because you are using welfare budget to house some of these people. So wouldn't those funds offset some of these funds?
Theoretically, they might, but we haven't had that conversation yet, so I can't confirm that we would be using the funds from welfare to support this project. The idea would be that this project would save city welfare money in the event that we have this additional sheltering space.
Okay, thanks.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Don't worry, I'm not gonna yell at you. So, you know, this problem keeps me up at night, obviously, I've seen it increase. People have come to me and tell me it's increased. My first question is, are we seeing that more people in Nashua are becoming unhoused? Or are we also seeing people coming from other towns and cities coming here because we have I think, a better handle on it? Not that obviously we haven't solved the problem, but a better handle on it, or maybe than some other towns and cities? Are we seeing that?
We haven't been specifically tracking, so this population is very transient, so it's very difficult to track exactly who's where they're from. We might go out to an encampment site one day and see someone go back to that same site, it's abandoned, and they've moved on to somewhere else. We do know that we have a pretty large chronically homeless population in the city of Nashua, so we are very familiar with a lot of the folks that are living outside. But as you saw the warming stations numbers, we had 97 folks in March. It's unclear where all of those folks came from, if they're all in Nashua already, if they were folks that might have been couch surfing and now that option was no longer available to them. So it's a tough question to answer because
Although
we haven't.
common sense provides an answer. I mean, how many homeless shelters do you see in Amherst, Hollis,
Right.
Merrimack, Brookline?
Follow up to that? So, I mean, you know, it was funny because the library earlier said, you know, it's a safe place to go, and then you're telling me, they just hired some security guards because there's been some issues there. So I was there tonight, and there was, a tremendous amount of homeless, or what appeared to be. Again, I don't want to make assumptions there, but I see the same people often, so you can kind of see who is a regular and who's not. I'd obviously like to see this problem solved in a way that's unique. Maybe Nashua becomes a leader in solving some of this homelessness, unshelteredness. I don't know if this is it. I hope so. Maybe, it just seems like you said it's transient. You're not always getting the same people. Some people don't want to be helped. Some do. Maybe they have some other issue going on that you can't help. I hope if this is something that ends up on the priority list and it's up there, that it also is not just a Band-Aid, but something that can help long-term, so we can start to maybe help people when they become that way. And we're always like almost deferred maintenance, right? We're ahead of the game, and as someone becomes unsheltered, we're able to help them right away. And it's not always going backtracking, trying to help someone that's been unsheltered for 5 or 6 years and has all kinds of issues that we have to work on and try to help them with. So I hope that's it, but I guess I'm hopeful that this would help that.
Thank you, and I think to touch on your point about the library and the folks there, nothing against the library, but our city's just missing a place where there's staff that are trained to deal with this population. So on the previous slide, you guys saw that a lot of individuals have co-occurring disorders. So some folks may be struggling with mental illness. We're seeing a lot of individuals with developmental disabilities that are homeless. So we would have one-stop shop, basically, where folks are met by trained professionals who are understanding of their conditions and able to work with them. Right now, the library is kind of serving as a Band-Aid where these folks are going because this is a public place where they can sit and be warm and be safe. And they're not really receiving the supports or resources to get them housed, employed, and successful because the staff there just aren't trained to deal with, helping folks to that level.
Great, thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. So with the size of the building and the budget that you're proposing for it, how many individuals would you be able to serve in a given day?
So ideally, if the shelter portion was full, that would be 30, and then we would have 6, 7, 8, 10 in the transitional housing units, so that would bring us up to 40. And if I'm going off of like a similar size of the warming station that we utilized, there was capacity for 90 folks in that building. So I would say, my math's terrible, 90 plus 30.
100 to 150.
Yeah, it's 100 to 150.
So, but, so you would be able to give them full services, or some of these people would just be there to get warm, or like, can you break down, like, how much of that $1.5 million is going to actually serve people more than just it being a place where they can go to get warm?
So there would.
And how many people does that translate to?
It depends, because sometimes folks need different things, so it's hard to kind of utilize time to address what they would be receiving in terms of supports. So for example, some folks need help creating a resume. Some folks may need help applying for apartments because they don't have a phone or a computer. Some folks may need assistance filling out a Medicaid application. So it depends on the supports that they're needing. But ideally, all of the folks that are in the transitional shelter and the transitional apartments would be followed regularly by the community health workers that are there on site. So there'd at least be 40 folks that are being serviced regularly by the community health workers that are there. And then anybody who comes into the drop-in center for additional supports could be served. It's just hard to put time with that.
Okay.
Alderwoman Clee.
Thank you, and I know this is gonna sound like a really weird question to ask, but anybody who walks in the library knows that we have homeless in there for warming and so on. And you made a comment to Alderman Clemmons that, no pox against the library, but they don't have the staff that can have this. Would it behoove us, saying right now the library is moving books out of the way and so on, so people can sleep, or sometimes you find them sleeping in a corner somewhere, wouldn't it behoove us to put staff there that could, in fact, help these instead of, and don't get me wrong, I love this idea, instead of building it so that they will come, should we go to where they're at? We talk about that with children and classrooms and so on. We go to where they're at. And I know you worked on the program to help with the police and so on, to go where they're at to kind of help diffuse things and to help the police. Would it not beneficial for us to go where they're at and help them, maybe kind of work with the library to create a safe space that you could set something up, if nothing else, just kind of in the interim?
I think in the interim, it would be very helpful to have some sort of resource hub, but I think the overall concern is just the lack of housing that's available.
Yeah.
So if the library were to be closed, or these folks wouldn't have a bed to lay down, so it's not meeting the full need that we're proposing with this resource center and shelter, but I think that it's an excellent idea to meet people where they're at when we can.
May I?
Yeah.
The reason I bring it up is because if there's a safety within our library, that the library suddenly has to hire 2 security officers, and these people, you're right, they're not gonna have a bed, but they're there anyways, and if they're just sleeping and warming, I just think it would be a good place to help them, benefit them, maybe to help, and you guys do phenomenal work, so please don't think I'm being critical, but if we know where they're located, and they're trying to find some space and so on, it might kind of help to, as you pointed out, do resumes, do all these other types of things. Just a thought, at least in the interim.
And we do have community health workers through the Division of Public Health and Community Services that will meet clients there. So they have gone to the library, and sometimes they'll work with the folks that are there, or if they're looking for one of their clients, a lot of the hot spots to go is the library, so that's one of the first stops, or the day cafe. So there are folks that are there that are willing to engage with services that the community health workers are working with. But there are some folks that aren't looking for services, and they may just be there to warm up.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief comment. I want to thank LaTanya and Director Bagley and the group of city staff that have been working on trying to continue to hone and improve our processes for dealing and working with the unhoused population across the city. I just wanted to be clear that the proposal that's before you this evening is a current representation of the needs and therefore the facility that's contemplated for these purposes in the future. But it's quite possible that we'll continue to modify this request based on changing needs across the community. And frankly, this is an ongoing and evolving conversation. What I really think that we're looking at, and I don't want to speak directly for LaTanya or Director Bagley or anyone else, but we're looking at this conversation through the ad hoc committee as a starting point to begin a larger policy conversation about what the city would like to do to advance the opportunity to house these individuals. Because we believe two things. One, that's an emergent issue, but to Alderman Sullivan's question earlier, it's going to be a growing issue. And so while we may be able to minimize the expenditures from the welfare budget, the force that we can't really anticipate is the continued and growing need and ever-growing population of unhoused individuals across the community. And so I wanted to just circle back to say this proposal may change. The budgetary numbers that you see before you are a reflection of a concept plan, and to Alderman Clemens' point, the number of individuals being served or the specific services within the facility might change. They may even be based on the availability of grant funds intended for very specific purposes that are available across the state of New Hampshire. But I really think that this conversation is intended to, yes, secure a position within the capital plan over the next 5 years, but to hopefully provide a jumping off point for this committee, but really the Board of Aldermen more generally, to have a conversation about what we're doing for our unhoused population. Thank you.
Alderman Lopez, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Alderman Lopez.
So I just wanted to comment on the use of the library. The library has been very patient and supportive, and they've done a lot of their own staff development to kind of be supportive of it. But as a facility, it is not what is needed for anything like a warming station. Is because there's an absence of other partners that we used to have at different times. I mean, we heard earlier, there's 3 bathrooms at the library. So you can't really use it as a warming station unless you are literally committing to having no other plan. We have in the past seen this model or something very similar to it work right in the downtown. We had a program called Connections that operated on Main Street for years. And it was a drop-in center, a connection hub, a chance for outreach workers to meet people, and a place for people who might be coming from different areas and different experiences to interact with each other and find out where city welfare is, where the library is, where the soup kitchen is. That program evolved into Hearts and was located at High Street for a while, pretty successfully. And there was an emergency respite program underneath it that provided short-term housing for people with specifically medical issues. So we've seen these programs work. Hearts also then moved over to the Pine Street Extension and focused on its peer support model rather than the homeless outreach and drop-in models. So you're seeing ad hoc development of emergency systems be put into place, like the Day Cafe. It's, I think the Dorothy Day Cafe or the Doris Day Cafe. It's not, as I understand it, literally open during the day. It's more like the morning. But it's just a simple place to go and get a cup of coffee, connect with some resources, and as soon as it becomes useful to people, then outreach workers do connect. So the public health department does do regular outreach. They even have the health van there pretty frequently. I would say definitely every week, possibly more than once. And they do outreach, and they do support the people that are there. But if you have the library as an alternative to a drop-in center, then you're giving people who are homeless a chance to identify the needs that they want to do. If you're making them use one place for everything, then some people can't go there because other people are going to go there as well, and they may have friction or they may abuse it. Other people may want to actually use it as a library, and you are positioning one population with extensive needs in Nashua against another population with extensive needs, because the library is also a place for families, for children from all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, and there's friction when you put those two populations next to each other because they have different needs. So I agree that this is a great, this is a budgetary and a policy area that we need to explore as a city because while we've seen the model work in the city before, we didn't have a lot of input into how it worked as a city because it was run exclusively by nonprofits and charities, And a lot of those leaders and organizers that did those things in the past have moved on without a sustainability plan, and their organizations have changed. So it is probably long past time that Nashua, as a city of, over 90,000 people, start saying we need to put ourselves in the game here and make sure that we are guiding these interventions so that we can make sure that when situations are happening, we're not relying on goodwill partnerships that are grant funded to address these things that have tangible impacts. Because what was kind of missing from this presentation is the increased amount of police activity that we've been seeing, fire activity that we've been seeing, and the impact on other services. I mean, I think DPW alone could talk about, when the situation gets out of control, they have to put a lot more man-hours, in place. So I think looking at this as, okay, this committee, and by the way, I recognize that I'm a guest, so I appreciate you being so graceful. This committee is looking at trying to manage the bonding needs that we're gonna see over the next couple of years. This is certainly one of them, because when you don't address a problem effectively, then you pay for it in other areas, and we have been paying for it very inefficiently in a lot of other areas.
Alderwoman Clee.
Just a quick question. Would the hope be that with this type of shelter and so on, that we could eliminate what's happening over in the, because I do agree with everything that Alderman Lopez had said, that potentially eliminate using the library as a warming station, or as it would be in conjunction with?
I would say it would probably be in conjunction with. It would give folks more choice on where to go, and they would know that there's supportive services available. So if that's what they're looking to engage in, then they would hopefully go over to the resource center.
Thank you.
Mr. Clemens, or sorry, Mr. Cummings. Clemens Cummings, again.
Thank you.
Two Irishmen.
I just want to make sure I understand correctly.
Clemens is not.
Beyond the capital expenditure request or budget that you have here, also embedded in this, and again, this is a clarifying question, there's going to be potentially a service delivery upgrade necessary, so an ongoing operational increase as well. Is that fair and correct to say? I just want to make sure we're accurate on that.
Yes, there would be.
Okay. Thank you.
Does Alderman Clemens have anything? Since I called on you anyway. No. All right, anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much. Very thorough. Well, we have another meeting scheduled for May 13. We're going to receive some further presentations. Does anyone have any general comments they wish to make at this time? Yes. Alderman
Trading
Lopez.
on the good nature of the committee again, I just wanted to clarify for anybody still watching and the Board of Education that I am a guest at the committee. I don't get a vote, and I'm basically sitting here instead of in the audience because there's a name plate up here. So I had pointed out last night that the Board of Education should be invited, particularly when we're talking about, the considerable amount of infrastructure that they have to maintain and the need for bonding that they have, to a seat at the table. And I realize that's impossible to do when you have the whole Board of Education, but it might be a courtesy if we have conversations specific to them to have at least the board president present. I realize that also conflicts with, you had the library trustees, so I don't want to create a whole new paradigm, but I just wanted to note that I'm only here because I have a name tag.
All right, Alderman Tebow.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a guest as well, but I just want to acknowledge our Alderman Lopez, who recently got engaged to Ms. Shawanda out there, Lee Daniels, and thank you. I just want to say congratulations to both of them while they're here. They're both here, so.
Are you going to get married in the chamber here? Or?
Yeah. That would be awesome.
Or in Nashua High South. I mean, we're building relationships across boards, right?
Amazing.
We do offer that service. If you
Apparently, everybody we know is a justice of the peace, too.
All right, well, is there I will call on Alderman Wilshire for motion to adjourn? Correct.
So made.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and the meeting is adjourned at 9:08 p.m.